Hi, I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading Running 1,000 Miles for Freedom by William and Ellen Craft. And we are on part 1, video 4. We're reading a bunch of different laws and experiences. So I'm going to dive right in. Actually, lost my page. Okay. Oh, gracious technology. I'm on my phone. It's easier with a real book. Okay. I knew a very humane and wealthy gentleman that bought a woman with whom he lived as his wife. They brought up a family of children, among whom were 3 nearly white, well-educated, and beautiful girls. It is unlawful in the slave states for anyone of purely European descent to intermarry with a person of African extraction, though a white man may live with as many colored women as he pleases without materially damaging his reputation in Southern society. On the father being suddenly killed, it was found that he had not left a will. But as the family had always heard him say that he had no surviving relatives, they felt that their liberty and property were quite secured to them, and, knowing the insults to which they were exposed, now their protector was no more, they were making preparations to leave for a free state. But poor creatures, they were soon sadly undeceived. A villain residing at a distance, hearing of the circumstance, came forward and swore that he was a relative of the deceased, and as this man bore, or assumed, Mr. Slater's name, the case was brought before one of those horrible tribunals presided over by a second Judge Jeffreys and calling itself a court of justice, but before whom no colored person nor an abolitionist was ever known to get his full rights. A verdict was given in favor of the plaintiff, whom the better portion of the community thought had willfully conspired to cheat the family. The heartless wretch not only took the ordinary property, but actually had the aged and friendless widow and all her fatherless children, except Frank, a fine young man about 22 years of age, and Mary, a very nice girl a little younger than her brother, brought to the auction stand and sold to the highest bidder. Mrs. Slater had cash enough that her husband and master left to purchase the liberty of herself and children, but on her attempting to do so, the pusillanimous scoundrel who had robbed them of their freedom claimed the money as his property, and poor creature, she had to give it up. According to law, as will be seen hereafter, a slave cannot own anything. The old lady never recovered from her sad affliction. At the sale, she was brought up first, and after being vulgarly criticized in the presence of all her distressed family, was sold to a cotton planter who said he wanted the proud old critter to go to his plantation to look after the little woolly heads while their mammies were working in the field. When the sale was over, then came the separation, and oh, deep was the anguish of that slave mother's heart when called from her darlings forever to part. The poor mourning mother, of reason bereft, soon ended her sorrows and sank cold in death. Antoinette, the flower of the family, a girl who was much beloved by all who knew her for her Christ-like piety, dignity of manner, as well as her great talents and extreme beauty, was bought by an uneducated and drunken slave dealer. I cannot give a more correct description of the scene when she was called from her brother to the stand than will be found in the following lines. Why stands she near the auction stand, that girl so young and fair? What brings her to this dismal place? Why stands she weeping there? Why does she raise that bitter cry? Why hangs her head with shame, as now the auctioneer's rough voice so rudely calls her name? But see, she grasps a manly hand, and in a voice so low, as scarcely to be heard, she says, "My brother, must I go?" A moment's pause, then midst a wail of agonizing woe, his answer falls upon the ear, "Yes, sister, you must go. No longer can my arm defend, no longer can I save my sister from the horrid fate that waits her as a slave." Blush, Christian, blush, for e'en the dark untutored heathen see thy inconsistency, and lo, they scorn thy God and thee. The low trader said to a kind lady who wished to purchase Antoinette out of his hands, "I reckon I'll not sell the smart critter for $10,000. I always wanted her for my own use." The lady, wishing to remonstrate with him, commenced by saying, "You should remember, sir, that there is a just God. Hoskins, not understanding Mrs. Houston, interrupted her by saying, "I does, and guess it's monstrous kind in him to send such likely niggers for our convenience." Did I say Huston or Houston? Let's go with Houston. Mrs. Houston, finding that a long course of reckless wickedness, drunkenness, and vice had destroyed in Hoskins every noble impulse, left him. Antoinette, poor girl, also seeing that there was no help for her, became frantic. I can never forget her cries of despair when Hoskins gave the order for her to be taken to his house and locked in an upper room. On Hoskins entering the apartment in a state of intoxication, a fearful struggle ensued. The brave Antoinette broke loose from him, pitched herself head foremost through the window, and fell upon the pavement below. Her bruised but unpolluted body was soon picked up, restoratives brought, doctor called in, but alas, it was too late. Her pure and noble spirit had fled away to be at rest in those realms of endless bliss where the wicked cease from troubling and the weary are at rest. Antoinette, like many other noble women who are deprived of liberty still, holds something sacred, something undefiled, some pledge and keepsake of their higher nature, and, like the diamond in the dark, retains some quenchless gleam of celestial light. On Hoskins fully realizing the fact that his victim was no more, he exclaimed, "By thunder, I am a used-up man!" The sudden disappointment and the loss of $2,000 was more than he could endure, so he drank more than ever, and in a short time died, raving mad with delirium tremens. The villain Slater said to Mrs. Houston, the kind lady who endeavored to purchase Antoinette from Hoskins, "Nobody needn't talk to me about buying them are likely niggers, for I'm not going to sell 'em." "But Mary is rather delicate," said Mrs. Houston, "and being unaccustomed to hard work cannot do you much service on a plantation." "I don't want her for the field," replied Slater, "but for another purpose." Mrs. Houston understood what this meant and instantly exclaimed, "Oh, but she is your cousin." "The devil she is," said Slater, and added, "Do you mean to insult me, madam, by saying that I am related to niggers?" "No," replied Mrs. Houston, "I do not wish to offend you, sir, but wasn't Mr. Slater, Mary's father, your uncle?" "Yes, I calculate he was," said Slater, "but I want you and everybody to understand that I'm no kin to his niggers." Let's pause right there. What's going on? Clearly this is your cousin. What's going on in your head? The ways people rationalized how they treated slaves, even people who were in their families. Sure, maybe she's his daughter, and maybe by blood that makes her my cousin, but I ain't no kin to no nigger, so she's no cousin of mine. I just wonder how many people were like, yeah, I'm not kin to any black people, so do what you will with them. They're not my family. Nope. "Oh, very well," said Mrs. Houston, adding, "Now what will you take for the poor girl?" "Nothing," he replied, "for as I said before, I'm not going to sell, so you needn't trouble yourself no more. If the critter behaves herself, I'll do as well by her as any man." Slater spoke up boldly, but his manner and sheepish look clearly indicated that his heart within him was at strife with such accursed gains, for he knew whose passions gave her life, whose blood ran in her veins. The monster led her from the door. He led her by the hand to be his slave and paramour in a strange and distant land. Poor Frank and his sister were handcuffed together and confined in prison. Their dear little twin brother and sister were sold and taken where they knew not. But it often happens that misfortune causes those whom we counted dearest to shrink away, while it makes friends of those whom we least expected to take any interest in our affairs. Among the latter class, Frank found two comparatively new faithful friends to watch the gloomy paths of the unhappy little twins. In a day or two after the sale, Slater had 2 fast horses put to a large light van, and placed in it a good many small but valuable things belonging to the distressed family. He also took with him Frank and Mary, as well as all the money for the spoil, and after treating all his low friends and bystanders, and drinking deeply himself, He started in high glee for his home in South Carolina. But they had not proceeded many miles before Frank and his sister discovered that Slater was too drunk to drive. But he, like most tipsy men, thought he was all right. And as he had with him some of the ruined family's best brandy and wine, such as he had not been accustomed to, and being a thirsty soul, he drank till the reins fell from his fingers, and in attempting to catch them, he tumbled out of the vehicle and was unable to get up. Frank and Mary there and then contrived a plan by which to escape. As they were still handcuffed by one wrist each, they alighted, took from the drunken assassin's pocket the key, undid the iron bracelets, and placed them upon Slater, who was better fitted to wear such ornaments. As the demon lay unconscious of what was taking place, Frank and Mary took from him the large sum of money that was realized at the sale, as well as that which Slater had so very meanly obtained from their poor mother. They then dragged him into the woods, tied him to a tree, and left the inebriated robber to shift for himself while they made good their escape to Savannah. The fugitives being white, of course, no one was suspected that they were slaves. Slater was not able to call anyone to his rescue till late the next day, and as there were no railroads in that part of the country at that time, it was not until late the following day that Slater was able to get a party to join him for the chase. A person informed Slater that he had met a man and woman in a trap, answering to the description of those whom he had lost, driving furiously toward Savannah. So Slater and several slave hunters on horseback started off in full tilt with their bloodhounds in pursuit of Frank and Mary. On arriving at Savannah, the hunters found that the fugitives had sold the horses and trap and embarked as free white persons for New York. Slater's disappointment and rascality rascality. That's a nice word. Slater's disappointment and rascality. I'm going to use rascality. Okay, I'm over it now. Slater's disappointment and rascality so preyed upon his base mind that he, like Judas, went and hanged himself. As soon as Frank and Mary were safe, they endeavored to redeem their good mother, but alas, she was gone. She had passed on to the realm of spirit life. In due time, Frank learned from his friends in Georgia where his little brother and sister dwelt. So he wrote at once to purchase them, but the persons with whom they lived would not sell them. After failing in several attempts to buy them, Frank cultivated large whiskers and mustachios. Let's cover all this up. Frank cultivated large whiskers and mustachios, cut off his hair, put on a wig and glasses, and went down as a white man and stopped in the neighborhood where his sister was. And after seeing her and also his little brother, arrangements were made for them to meet at a particular place on a Sunday, which they did, and got safely off. I saw Frank myself when he came for the little twins. Though I was then quite a lad, I well remember being highly delighted by hearing him tell how nicely he and Mary had served Slater. Frank had so completely disguised or changed his appearance that his little sister did not know him and would not speak till he showed their mother's likeness, the sight of which melted her to tears, for she knew the face. Frank might have said to her, "O Emma, my sister, speak to me. Dost thou not know me, that I am thy brother? Come to me, little Emma. Thou shalt dwell with me henceforth, and know no care or want." Emma was silent for a space, as if 'twere hard to summon up a human voice. Frank and Mary's mother was my wife's own dear aunt. Oh, so that's how he knows all this story and how he saw them. So William Craft was related to the Slaters because, William and Ellen Craft were related to the Slaters because Frank and Mary's mother was his wife's own dear aunt. So the slave who was with Slater and had Frank and Mary and the twins and the one who died was Ellen Craft's aunt. So that's why they are well acquainted with this story. Okay, it all is making sense to me. Are we getting to a good stopping point? Really, we're not. Okay, I'm going to keep reading for a little bit more. Okay, after this great diversion from our narrative, which I hope, dear reader, you will excuse, I shall return to it at once. My wife was torn from her mother's embrace in childhood and taken to a distant part of the country. She had seen so many other children separated from their parents in this cruel manner that the mere thought of her ever becoming the mother of a child to linger out a miserable existence under the wretched system of American slavery appeared to fill her very soul with horror, and as she had taken what I felt to be an important view of her condition, I did not at first press the marriage, but agreed to assist her in trying to devise some plan by which we might escape from our unhappy condition and then be married. Okay, I'm going to stop here because this is really interesting. So Ellen Craft had experienced herself and had seen many times slave children ripped from their mothers, and she decided that she didn't want to have any children. She did not want to give birth under this miserable existence under the wretched system of American slavery. Okay, so she is making some very bold decisions. She's like, nope, I'm not gonna have any kids. And here in 2020, sure, that's a choice many women can make. Not all are able to make that choice, but many women can make that choice. They can choose to abstain from sex. They can choose to use birth control. They can choose to have an abortion, right? They can choose. A slave woman did not have those choices available to her. If her master decided she was going to have sex, she was going to have sex. Abstaining was not a choice that was open to her. Was there birth control? Sure, as long as there have been people in sex, there's been birth control. Did she have access to it? My guess is no. If she did end up pregnant, could she have an abortion? Absolutely. Because as long as people have been having sex, there have been abortions, right? But coming by a safe one would have probably been an issue. So what a bold move to make as a slave woman, to say, nope, all of my choices are going to mean I remain childless. And William was like, okay, then we won't get married yet while we're still slaves, because he was like, I'm clearly going to be having sex with you once we're married, and when we're having sex, children will come. So he was like, okay, we can escape before we get married. But that it crossed her mind to be like, no, this is where I draw my line. This is where I put my foot down. That's extraordinary. And that she had the chutzpah to back it up. Wow, not only did it cross her mind, but she was like, I'm not having any kids. What you gonna do about it? What you gonna do about it? She was gangsta. I'm loving it. So that's where we're stopping for today with William and Ellen Craft's Running 1,000 Miles for Freedom. But I also wanted to add, so this project that I'm doing, reading 19th century American literature, I'm doing it because I think people should enjoy 19th century American literature as much as I do. But I also realize that I am really talking about miscegenation literature. That comes as no surprise to me. I've always enjoyed miscegenation literature, and that just means literature about people of mixed race. But I didn't realize that I was, gravitating toward miscegenation literature in this project. So now it kind of opens me up mentally to some other things that we can read, and some different authors that we can read, and some that we can't read yet because the copyright has not expired on their work. But one day, Nella Larsen's passing, yes, when the copyright expires, and George Schuyler's Black No More, yes, when the copyright expires. So anyway, those are my musings. I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda.